Hey, greetings, everyone. It's Naomi Wolf. I've been away, and you will find out in this podcast why I've been away and what happened. But I'm so happy to be back with you all. I feel like you'll see why I have a new lease on life, and I'm very, very, very grateful. So this is Outspoken, and you can find it over on Substack or on Daily Clout. And let's just get started. But before we do, I have two important announcements. When credible doctors start paying attention to repurposed medications, it's worth asking why. Dr. Harvey Risch, dear friend of ours, former professor of epidemiology at Yale University and now serving on the president's cancer panel, is helping to lead that conversation. A new groundbreaking observational study from the Wellness Company analyzed the off-label use of ivermectin and mebendazole in nearly 200 cancer patients treated by licensed doctors across cancers such as breast, prostate, lung, and colon. And the results are hard to ignore. After 6 months, 84% of patients experienced clinical benefit, including stable disease, tumor regression, or showing no evidence of disease whatsoever. This is not lab data. This is real-world patient experience. Dr. Risch, chief epidemiologist at the Wellness Company, called it an exciting signal, deserving serious scientific investigation and more accessible, lower-cost cancer care options. And that is why the Wellness Company makes it easy to get access to an ivermectin plus mebendazole formula using medications that are FDA approved for other indications and are being studied for these additional uses and other additional uses. It is doctor prescribed and USA compounded, designed to support patients exploring these emerging approaches under medical guidance. Ordering is simple and fully digital. Just fill out a quick intake form and a licensed doctor reviews it, and your prescription ships directly to your door. Head over to dailyclouthealth.com and use code dailyclout to save up to $60 off this order plus free shipping. I'm very excited to bring you that ad where we have great respect for the team over at the Wellness Company and, of course, Dr. Risch. And there are many nonsensical claims being made in the alternative healing space. And we know that if Dr. Risch is excited about a signal, it's worth investigating further. All right, you guys, I'm going to read a Substack essay that I wrote about a week ago explaining where I've been. And it's called Medical Purgatory Part 1. Subtitle is A Tale of Two Institutions, Healing or Horrors. So this is just the first part, and you'll hear the second part as soon as I write it. I've had yet another journey to and back from a Gehenna presented to me yet again by an allopathic hospital experience, as well as, perhaps not to jinx the outcome, a beautiful 21st century healing also presented by another such institution. It seems right now to be the story of two institutions, two approaches to medical care. I don't have an argument in this essay because I can barely process for myself what I've been through. I just feel so lucky to be alive and walking and pain-free, and as much as anything, grateful to be cogent. I am grateful beyond words to be using words, that atmosphere, that system of starlight. I'll lay out what happened and what I think at this moment about what happened, and you can draw your own conclusions. Maybe I was saved. Maybe I was almost lost. Maybe both. Maybe I was redeemed by incredible vigilance from a deadly coma or minimally from brain damage. Maybe I was subjected to unnecessary tortures, the worst I've endured in my life. Maybe both are true, maybe all of it. Maybe it was all completely necessary, including the unbelievable physical suffering I underwent. Far be it from me to quarrel with my far from guaranteed survival, apparently intact. And as everyone knows, I am not a medical doctor. So this is part 1. Via my diligent pursuit of alternative treatments for a hip that was painfully malfunctioning, secondary to the spina bifida occulta with which I was born, and which condition is stabilized by hardware at multiple vertebrae, L5S1, I had pushed the no alternative left option, a hip replacement, by 18 months. It's not uncommon for conditions such as the one with which I was born, which imperfectly closed my spine in utero, to cause secondary damage over time to a hip. So I felt I was doing pretty well. Since, as you know, I'd been told by an allopathic neurologist in 2013 that by now I'd be in a wheelchair, losing all of my functions, I considered my general good health, stamina, focus, and my relative mobility, even as I began to limp and have pain in my right hip over the course of 2025 and 2026, to be gifts from God and daily manifestations of a miracle. I also attributed my overall well-being to my extensive network of the best and bravest alternative healers, notably the brilliant and distinguished Dr. Henry Ely of the Energetic Health Institute, and you can find him at energetichealthinstitute.org, who advised me all the way. I also credit the journey I have taken with you here that led me to understand far more deeply than I had my basic anatomy and its systems, to get a sense of how joints work and what supplements and foods protect them, to have a deeper insight into the role of blood circulation in overall health, and to know what herbs promote healthful circulation, to know what muscles to stretch and work daily to give my spine and pelvis maximum support, to understand via Thermography for Health New York, which uses the incredible diagnostic tool of thermography, which shows via color hot spots in the body in place of the dangerous protocol of mammography, the value of a working lymphatic system in eliminating toxins and preventing cancer. As a result of learning all about the importance of lymphatic flow, I started to build activities such as red light saunas and other forms of sweating into my weekly schedule. Through all of this and more, I came to understand more about the activity of my cells themselves down to the mitochondria. And I will share my screen so you can see how fantastic this technology is. This is from Thermography for Health New York, and it shows different people's bodies, big people, little people, men, women. And here you can see, I wasn't going to post my breast thermography, but here you can see on someone else's breast thermography, the right breast is much hotter than the left breast. And so that is a sign that it's important to increase lymphatic flow. For instance, not wear underwire bras, or if you do, limit it. They teach you how to move the lymphatic fluid around your breasts and through your body in ways that I won't describe here, but you're supposed to do in the shower every morning. And generally it shows you how to prevent the kind of accumulation of toxins that they believe contribute to breast cancer before you get to the stage of having a lump or having, God forbid, a tumor or cancer. So to me, it's fascinating, and it makes really good sense. I benefited from interviewing some of the leaders in the alternative wellness space. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. Stop screen. I learned what specific vitamins and periodic internal cleanses I needed via Dr. Hadar Elbaz of the Vibrant Glow, also of TWC, who analyzed things sent through the mail I won't describe here. I tried to walk a few miles daily to get sun on my body and to avoid toxic thoughts, per my interviews with Dr. Ben Tapper and Dr. Kelly Victory of the Wellness Company. By the way, I'm just going to be explicit here. And it was actually one of the pharmacists at the Wellness Company in an interview who told me this, but I took it to heart. I don't just get sun on my face and my legs. I try to get sun on when he first said this, I thought he was joking, but he wasn't, on my abdomen and my thighs whenever I can. And it actually, does a lot to contribute to cellular health. It sounds a little silly, just like moving your lymphatic flow around your breast sounds a little silly, but it turns out to be very well based in basic anatomy. I took nattokinase supplements daily due to what I had learned from the pioneering work of Dr. Peter McCullough, since though I am unvaccinated by an mRNA vaccine, I have no idea what are the impacts on my blood from others around me who are mRNA vaccinated. I took kimchi supplements and ate fermented foods after having interviewed Kim Bright, founder of Brightcore. I had chiropractic treatments from Dr. Paul Malone in Marblehead, Mass, and I worked among the serious high school and college athletes. I was lucky to have been accepted as a client on a physical therapy plan developed by trainers at Accelerated Physical Therapy, also in Marblehead, Massachusetts. As I've said elsewhere, my journey into alternative health and healing has led me to rethink what health really is. We have such a black and white dualistic notion of health and illness in the West. I now know that you can have a serious physical condition, such as my problems with my skeleton, and still be systematically otherwise very healthy and heading always in the direction of healing. You can be like several friends of mine with cancer diagnoses who radiate health in every other way and who have beautiful qualities of life. Or conversely, you can have nothing wrong with you as far as allopathic tests and measurements reveal, and yet still be in a state of lassitude, toxicity, or general unwellness, sadly heading toward a disease state. I was so lucky to be able to invest in these alternative modalities. And as I learned over time how each of these was preventing a condition or complication that allopathic pharmacy would just treat with more and more prescriptions, bringing with them in turn the risk of more and more serious side effects, I came to believe that this approach was ultimately far less costly than would have been my remaining ignorant and passive in the face of my degenerating gait, pursuing only what allopathic medicine recommended. When I could put off surgery no longer, I chose the best orthopedic hospital in America. And since I have nothing but good things to say about them, I'm just going to name them. It's the Hospital for Special Surgery in the East, on East 70th Street. Fabulous. As you recall, I had nearly died of sepsis in a hospital after a bizarrely delayed surgery subsequent to my having sustained a burst appendix in 2023. So I definitely had a fear of hospitals. This fear had, it seemed, indeed led me to put the operation off for too long. Learning that fact also frustrated me. I wished that my exposure to the hot mess behind the last major public health effort, as revealed in our book that I edited with Amy Kelly, the Pfizer papers, had not caused such a dramatic, if reasonable, loss of confidence on my part in the whole allopathic system. I wished I could have just done exactly what my doctors advised me without the need for second guessing or resistance. But until I found a surgeon I really trusted, I knew too much to simply take that leap without a lot of other assurances. I'd been walking around with no cartilage on the right, it seemed, and my hip bone had started to chip. So my surgeon would need to add a bone graft. The surgeon I chose at last, and it's Dr. Bully at Hospital for Special Surgery, again, I have nothing but good things to say about them, was a legend in orthopedic surgery. But I was just as impressed with the way he answered all of my questions and did not rush me. I was impressed too with the way his staff seemed knowledgeable, respected, and able to give great independent advice. So unlike the automaton-like manner trained into support staff in other hospital settings. I tried to pay out of pocket for the surgery, as I also feared having health insurance again. All of my friends and loved ones with health insurance seemed to live from one medical scare subsequent to a costly test to another. But when I learned the surgery would cost about $70,000, I bit the bullet and applied for and received health insurance. This major orthopedic hospital in Manhattan, in my brief stay at least, and even with the drama of what I underwent, really worked. From the first time I entered it, I felt a lively organizational intelligence. from the patient-friendly training of the staff at the front desk who warmly welcomed us, to the administrative mindfulness that led to the positioning of an actual human being in front of digital login screens to help scared or frail people sign in to enter the system, to the fact that there was a range of lower and higher upholstered chairs in the waiting areas so that whatever people's level of mobility, they would be comfortable. All of it bespoke a coherent institution-wide level of consideration. I saw humanity in action again and again. What was surprising was how surprised I was to see humanity so prominently given a role in the administrative processes, as well as in the healing processes of a major American hospital. At an early appointment check-in, for instance, I was standing behind a young man who had been born, it seemed, with a spinal deformity. He was a little over 4 feet tall, and he stood on crutches. The counter was higher than his head. The staffer welcoming us into the waiting room checked in the taller person in front of him, and then she turned to me. She hadn't seen the young man standing in front of me. When I gestured to indicate that someone was ahead of me, she looked over the counter and saw that she had overlooked him. The regret and embarrassment on her face at her oversight were genuine and profound. I saw humanity of that kind manifest at that hospital again and again. My own fearful and aversive views of some aspects of allopathic medicine, which are based on evidence to which I was exposed in my work with the Pfizer papers, were not ridiculed or belittled by hospital staff. This was an extraordinary level of acceptance of others' perspectives to encounter in a traditional hospital setting. I did not mention my work on that project, of course, but views I held about what I did not want from a hospital setting definitely came up. For instance, I did not want a blood transfusion during surgery. I was afraid of receiving mRNA-vaccinated blood because of the many clotting diseases and blood problems that followed mRNA vaccination, as detailed in Pfizer papers, because of our lawyer Ed Berkovich's FOIA showing that the White House had concealed cases of thrombotic thrombocytopenia following mRNA vaccination, and because of the damaging impact of the spike protein and lipid nanoparticles on blood and on blood vessels. And this is a parenthesis. Daily Clout has recently been hacked, and many of these reports that link to the original Pfizer documents are no longer available online. Leaving online, however, AI claims that my presentation of this blood damage evidence is, quote, medical misinformation. We are working to republish all of the reports, but they are available meanwhile in the Pfizer papers books, and the White House FOIA results are linked above. End parenthesis. I learned in preparing for my own surgery that there are methodologies in place in New York City for storing one's own blood in advance of surgery. This is called autologous blood donation. NYU Langone offers it, as does Memorial Sloan Kettering. There's a facility, Memorial Blood Centers, that will store your blood prior to surgery, but you need a prescription from your doctor a week in advance. I had not arranged for this in time, but orthopedic hospital staff treated my concern about this issue with respect. They may not have seen the problem of vaccinated blood as I did, but the staff of this hospital did not dismiss or belittle me. I also learned when you enter the allopathic medical system that you are in a constant battle with shadowy nonprofits and government entities just to keep mastery of your own data and even of your own body parts and tissues. This hospital was literally the only one I have encountered that let me strike the many paragraphs in the initial consent forms that give third parties access around HIPAA privacy law. This may seem like a nerdy and trivial concern, but it is important. HR 3103, HIPAA law, HIPAA, is federal law, and it robustly protects your medical privacy. Interestingly, there are a lot of summaries, but you have to look a bit for the text itself, which I embedded above. As a result of HIPAA law, many nonprofits and state entities who are part of the marketplace of your data, and even part of the marketplace for your organs and tissue, if you are an organ donor, want you to sign away your HIPAA protections. After the battle we fought in 2023 against vaccine passport databases, I am never going to let anything weaken protections around my medical privacy ever again. Mission creep in terms of what is asked for by these consent forms is constant. I had to turn down a visiting nurses organization whose consent form wanted me to tell them who had my power of attorney to hand over my medical data to for-profit hospice networks. No, thank you. And to okay the organization or their assignees to come to take me away to another location, quote, in a disaster. The nurses organization refused to allow me to strike these additions and then sign, even though the consent form itself said clearly that the law did not allow the organization to refuse to allow me to decline those extra terms. A favorite trick these days is for the check-in staff to show you a digital signature screen to sign that says in fine print, I have been given a copy of the consent form, even as one is never given a copy of the consent form. The use of digital screens rather than paper lets hospitals claim inaccurately that you can't strike any part of the consent form. This is not true. Legal documents can be edited if they are initialed and signed. This orthopedic hospital, in contrast to all the others, simply printed out a copy of the consent form when I asked to strike some content. They let me strike the paragraphs to which I did not wish to consent, let me initial and sign it, and that was that. Into my file it went. The respect shown to patients in the hospital in choosing to do this was entirely unusual. The morning of my surgery, Brian and I waited in a beautiful waiting room next to the East River. Its waters flowed deep green, and the city sparkled in the June light. My mother had drawn a card for me and colored it and sent it to me via mail. I had brought it with me, of course. She had depicted me doing a cartwheel and had added dancing, wearing high heels, and hiking to the many activities she wished upon a healed me. My mom had drawn such, quote, healing pictures for me to look at with every surgery I've undergone, and every time I heal so quickly that my doctors are astonished. The unconscious mind, of course, is powerful. I was now in a hospital gown and lying on a bed by the rushing river. Brian had my picture and the other little items he would bring to me after the procedure. We were greeted by members of the surgical team and administrative teams. Though I continually opt out of being an organ donor in New York State, I keep somehow finding myself on the state organ donor list. I expressed to the young man in a beautifully tailored suit, whose job it was to prepare me, it seemed, psychologically for surgery, why I was worried about being listed in New York State as an organ donor. And I have in the brackets, donatelife.ny.gov. That's where you can seek to remove yourself from being an organ donor in New York. He listened patiently. Finally, he said emphatically, "You are not going to die. We are not going to take your organs." Brian, who was holding my hand, laughed out loud. We both actually felt heard. Then there was the goodbye to Brian and the wheeling into the surgical theater, the introduction to the surgical team, to the anesthesiologist, and to the man whose job it was to roll me on my side as I lost consciousness and to strap me onto the gurney. Then all was darkness. And then I woke up in yet another beautiful room, a corner room with a high ceiling and with light pouring in from 12-foot windows. Was I in heaven? My pain was gone. The river was farther below me than it had been before. It was racing like a goddess in a hurry. I could see all the way to Queens. The city was like a beehive. Everything had purpose and direction. My life would begin again. I think my surgeon and his colleague greeted me. My memory is unclear, and I believe that they said that the surgery had been a success. My mom's drawing of myself fully healed had been placed on a lovely tray. Had Brian placed it there? I was still high from the anesthesia or the relief or all of it, also oxycodone. I felt nothing but joy. Brian came to visit and left when visiting hours ended. He was happy. I was happy. Dinner was wheeled in, nutritious, delicious. It tasted like real food. I was giddy. Mashed potatoes, real turkey, and HGTV had never been more interesting. Property Brothers, what would they do with that veranda? The world was new, healthy, and sparkly, and entirely delectable. I'd been chatting with my roommate, a woman a few years younger than I, who worked in a senior role in a major hospital in a major city. I remember that with what was left of my conscious mind, my prefrontal cortex mind, I was thinking, don't get into anything substantive. She was very nice, but I really wanted to stay anonymous and to remain well out of any fights. I knew too well how electrically, for good or bad, there is no way to know in advance, any mention of my work with the Pfizer papers charges the air. I kept my remarks to kids, schools, neighborhoods. I slept and woke the next day, a sleep of heaven. No beeping somehow, no blinking lights, blessed darkness. I don't know how this hospital solved the purgatorial problem of sleep that other hospitals cannot solve, but it did so. Mine was a deep, pure Victorian invalid's sleep. I woke to a good new day. I would be discharged today. I was given another oxycodone. Unfortunately, in the space between last night's pleasant chat and this morning's more focused exchanges, my sweet mate had found out about my work on the Pfizer papers. I then started to fend off pointed questions from across the room, the kind my anesthesia-weakened brain could not parry without effort. I would rather not talk about it, I said. She forged ahead, quote, your team says that there was a high rate of miscarriage in the Pfizer papers, but you can only know that if you know the total number of all the pregnant women in the study, end quote, or words to that effect. All of this exchange is approximate, as I was on heavy painkillers at the time. This argument of hers was a talking point that came at us a fair amount. It was in the Google list of rebuttal talking points. There are good answers to this. We do know the total number of pregnant women Pfizer followed, 270. Of those, Pfizer lost 236 of the subjects' records. Of those 34, over 80% lost their babies. I knew this, but I also knew that to explain this would require of me the very life force I needed in order to heal. Quote, this is me. I am happy to send you the studies. I just really need to rest right now. Quote, this is her, but, and then she came at me again, as I recall, from another rhetorical direction, with the procedural guarantee of safety and efficacy for new medications from the FDA or from the CDC. I knew that I could rebut this challenge as well if I summoned all of my efforts, but that it would hurt obscurely to do so. Do you mind if we just don't talk about it? I said. I think I should just rest. Happy to send you a book. But, and this was her, and then as I recall, there was a biodistribution question from her. All of her questions were reasonable and well articulated. I respected what seemed to be her sincere curiosity about what we had found. She was assessing the solidity of the evidence we presented, though her sources were derived from the way that Google carelessly summarized our work, and she was using the analytical tools she had from her training. I respected the intellectual rigor of her questions, though it frustrated me that she did not have our primary research documents to assess. At the same time, this was not the time or the place. At the same time, I could not walk. I could not even leave the conversation. At the same time, I did not have any of my own documentation with me, and I was weak and drugged. Irrationally or not, I felt attacked and unsafe. I answered her at last. My prefrontal cortex was no longer on an alert. I told the truth, and all the feeling I had about the truth poured out into my body with it. I told her about the pregnant women. I told her about the flattened placentas, about the women dying in childbirth. I told her about the biodistribution study that Pfizer did, showing that the dangerous materials, the lipid nanoparticles, the mRNA, went all over the body, accumulating in the spleen, brain, lymphatic system, liver, and if you are a woman, in the ovaries. I told her about the 7-year-old children whose deaths from stroke were buried in footnotes. It is a massive crime, I said. When I spoke, I could feel a shunt of some kind in my heart open. Due to the drugs I was on, the pure rage I felt about these deaths was unmediated by my prefrontal cortex. I was all limbic system. I felt my blood push like a tidal flow, as it had never done before, from my enraged heart and surge around my entire circulatory system. I felt it wash through and over my exhausted brain. There was silence from my roommate. But now, please, I really don't want to talk about it any further, I said yet again. I really do need to rest. Then there was a tense silence. It lasted about 20 minutes. I clicked the Property Brothers back on, but you know how women are, especially smart women. We can be tense together in a room, louder than any TV program. Then I began to see a waving semicircle of color, the aura of a migraine. I've experienced this before. It did not worry me. I watched it grow into almost a full circle, slowly distorting my vision. Then, I don't know how, for some reason, a nurse was in my room asking me a question. When I tried to answer her, I could not find coherent speech. She looked horrified. She stepped out, as I recall, and stepped back in quickly, holding some cards with pictures on them. One showed a bird. I knew it was a bird. In my soul, I knew everything possible about the birdness of the image, but when she asked me to say what it was, I grasped and grasped silently for the name of the thing, and finally could do nothing but shake my head. She asked me another question, the date, the name of the hospital, and I tried to answer her. Gibberish. I tried harder. Every third or fourth word came, but in between, there were no words. I could not find them. She looked more concerned than ever and signaled to the exterior of the room in some way. Suddenly, my bed was surrounded by about a dozen people, men and women, all in hospital scrubs. All looked as concerned as she did. One or two of them also tried talking to me. Again, I struggled fruitlessly to answer. I felt a nightmare feeling that I was wandering down the hallway of language, the place I lived, my very identity, the place I thought of as home, but that 4 or 5 necessary doors in that hallway were now locked shut. I shook my head again, helpless. The group stood up as one, the collective worry in the room still more heightened. A gurney appeared in their midst. The men and women bundled me onto the gurney and sped me downstairs. And this is the final image of this essay of a bird, which I did not then know how to describe as being a bird. That's my essay. That's part 1. So you can make of that what you will. Let's see what the comments say. Let's see. Daily Cloud, I heard that thieves broke into the Arcane University. Okay, I don't know what that means. That is sort of nonsense. So there we have it. That's part 1. And I think there are a lot of lessons there. There are more lessons coming in part 2. But I guess what I really want to kind of showcase or highlight is the difference it makes when a hospital has a humanistic orientation, even if it's a traditional allopathic medical institution, like the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York. It made a tremendous difference to me. The hospital I'm about to describe in part 2 is a very stark contrast to that. I think the other really interesting thing that leaps out at this is the connection between mind and body. I don't think I could ever say my hospital roommate caused me to lose the power of speech, but I don't think we can rule it out, because, again, not to unfairly blame her or single her out, but a lot of my work over the course of decades has been about the mind-body connection. And, by now there are decades worth of studies documenting how directly the mind connects to the body. I mean, just all the ways in which the endocrine system and the hormonal system, the circulatory system, and the, digestion relate to brain impulses, right? And neurological impulses. It's not a stretch to say that the mind and body are one entity. Of course they are. I could give you so many examples, like the way women stop lactating when there's a threat in the room. The letdown response, as it's called when you're nursing, really depends on you feeling safe. And this is evolutionary. It goes back to when we were nursing babies in, caves with wild animals outside. I mean, if you have to get up and run with baby, you will stop nursing so that your body can do other things more effectively, so you can survive and your baby can survive. I mean, there's so many more examples. I wrote a book called Vagina in 2012 that showed how intimately, especially for women, sexual response is connected to mind states, and in turn, how directly sexual response and sexual well-being affect mind states. I showed that. I thought it was a really big insight. It's worth recycling it, whatever, 2012, 14 years later, because that book has kind of faded from memory. It's a very timely book, I think. It turns out that orgasm in women releases chemicals that boost confidence and self-knowledge and trust in self and ability to discern well and to rely on oneself, courage, resistance. Isn't that interesting? And like that insight just kind of explains, or could explain, the whole history of like all these countries that, deal with their women by a clitoridectomy and infibulation. They're literally affecting the brains of women to force them to be more compliant, more accepting, less resistant of slave-like or subordinated social roles. But in this case, I think it's really important to talk about, hospitals and stress, because the stressor of what my brain on drugs, right, and after surgery and with the vulnerability of getting over anesthesia, perceived as a threatening situation, an unsafe situation, or a stressful situation. I can't prove that it caused a reaction that was negative in the functioning of my brain that even affected the centers for language, but that was how I experienced it, and definitely the timeline is problematic. So that's really worth thinking about, not to beat up on my roommate, although I do think the first few times someone says, let me rest, I think you should let them rest, just as a matter of humanity and courtesy. But I think that there's a lesson there, a really profound one for hospitals, because that was just an example of an emotional stressor in my room. But as you're about to see from the next hospital to which I'm about to be taken, beeping machines all night, lights on all night, people in masks, doctors and nurses who are masked, language that's carelessly dark or ominous, passivity where patients can't see outside the room or raise or lower their bed or turn their light off and on, the humiliation of robes open in the back and no privacy. And I'll get to what happened to me in the next section, but all of these things maybe really make a big difference in our healing, the not being able to see the sun day after day after day. These are stressors, right? And I think that we really need to talk more about how to make hospitals places again where people have a sense of refuge and they can, their bodies can feel safe and nurtured and cared for without all of these additional stressors that reduce them to a set of numbers, right? I just think it's so interesting. And Rose Kelleher, hi Rose. So nice to see my old friends here every time I do a podcast. I see some of my favorite loyal readers and friends. And she says, I've been critically ill twice in my lifetime. It's no fun at all. Thank God you are doing well. Benedictions, Naomi. Thank you, Rose. I really appreciate that. I can't believe my luck, honestly. And that's going to be part two. Like, what is the meaning of having been so, not even ill, but impaired, right? And then recovering so quickly. It's not even 3 weeks since my surgery, and 2 days in the ICU, which I'll get to in part 2 at another hospital, where they were watching my brain function, essentially, because they didn't know what was causing me to have this aphasia. And I've been hiking, I've been, well, I shouldn't say dancing, but, swaying on a dance floor. No impact, Dr. Bully. But walking, I'm in no pain. I'm taking no pain medication. It's just miraculous. And again, these are mysterious things, right? We'll get to that. I don't want to get ahead of it, and I don't want to jinx it. God forbid. I'm always in the hand of fate, right? Even now, but less than 3 weeks since all of this drama, and I'm virtually recovered. Is it the year of learning about alternative health and healing and all the things I did to prepare my body to recover from a shock and a trauma, as easily as possible? Is it just incredibly gifted doctors? Is it my mom, taking the time to make a little kind of shrine? I mean, we're not supposed to make, graven images, obviously, but she doesn't believe what I believe about that. But anyway, beautiful little painting, which I still have a photograph of. Someone stole it, or it got lost in between the shuffle from one hospital to the other, or someone maybe took it because it was adorable. But I still have a picture of it. And, your mom making an image of you fully recovered sends your subconscious mind a powerful message that I'm already fully recovered. It's what Joe Dispenza and other people talk about, manifesting already what you want to have happen in the future. And maybe when your mom does it, it has special magical powers. Who knows, right? We'll get into that in part 2. But all of this to say, illness is a lot more complicated than allopathic medicine would like us to believe. And healing is a lot more complicated and mysterious and magical than allopathic medicine would like us to believe. I mean, that's my takeaway. And there's more. Like, I have to notice, I don't mean to get ahead of myself and get ahead of part 2. But, Brian pointed this out. It's the 3rd time in 4 years that I've almost died. Like I fell when I was racing after Loki on a walk in February in Massachusetts, and lay on the sidewalk, broken shoulder, unable to move. And nice neighbors came out and got me into an ambulance and, tracked down poor Loki, who loyally stood not far away from me and made it all end well, right? I could have frozen to death, or Loki could have wandered off and been lost or frozen to death. I mean, bad things could have happened, and they didn't. And then I recovered in like 6 weeks. Surreal. I actually had some of the Pfizer papers researchers pray over my shoulder, which, I'm Jewish. I'm like, what are these Christians doing? Whatever. They can put their hands on me and pray. I'll take the prayers. Literally, you cannot believe, I've posted the x-rays, the before and after. Like, my bones literally drew closer together after they put their hands on me and prayed for my healing. Like, God bless them, like, I'll take it. I'll take the Christian prayer. Like, yeah, sure. It was amazing. I recovered in 6 weeks fully, and now I have no side effects from a broken shoulder. 2023, I almost died. I saw my deceased father. I was 6 days with sepsis in a horrible hospital. I'll just say it, Vassar Hospital in Poughkeepsie. So near death, so sick. And they were about to intubate me. I'd had no food. I was on IV liquids. The surgery to heal my sepsis was getting pushed further and further away every day. Who knows why? That's another conversation, right? Like the way that AI can just, put a do not resuscitate, in a code on your notes, if that's what happens. I don't know, but I'm very mindful of having interviewed two parents of two young adults, healthy young adults with special needs, who both died in the exact same way through medical murder, with the same cocktail of horrible, everyone knows they'll kill you drugs, including remdesivir and morphine and major barbiturates. And these two healthy young adults died the same way. Grace Sharat illegally had a do not resuscitate note on her chart that her family did not put there, that she did not put there. So I'm very mindful of that. And, I thought it was weird that my surgery kept getting pushed off further and further. And an essay I haven't written yet because I don't want to be sued by the hospital, but I think I have to write it, is that AI now can do this without anyone's hands being bloodied or anyone being responsible, right? Isn't that interesting? And then lastly, this latest experience, what am I supposed to make of it? 3 weeks ago, I couldn't speak. And then I was tortured. Maybe they saved my life. Maybe they saved my consciousness in ways I can't even describe yet, which I'll describe in part 2. Just giving you a little bit of a headline heads up. I was not allowed to have any painkillers for 2 days when I was in the other hospital. And I wasn't allowed to have a walker or a cane or any support. So I was forced to hobble back and forth from a bed I couldn't adjust to a toilet not designed for people, with impaired mobility, with no painkillers, nothing to lean on, no running water, right? No running water. No light, no window, no ventilation, people in masks, right, for 2 days, rolled back and forth with no painkillers, with no training of how to roll someone who's just had a hip replacement surgery and a bone graft. I've never been in such pain. I was screaming and crying. I mean, I don't mean to get ahead of myself, but that was what was going to be ahead. Again, God bless them. Maybe they saved my consciousness. Maybe they saved me from slipping into a coma. Maybe all of it was necessary, but it was an extraordinary experience. I kind of barely got home in one, in any kind of state. I was completely scared and wrung out, and in agony. And now, less than 3 weeks later, I'm hiking for miles on beaches with no painkillers, in no pain. I don't know what to make of it. It's just like, I literally feel like God is like going, okay, valley of the shadow of death, taking you out of the valley of the shadow of death. Tell everyone about that. It's just God. I don't get it. It's miraculous. I'm sharing my intuitions. It's just God. But also, I don't mean to get ahead of myself. We are reading the Hebrew Bible, and I'm going to pick up again after this episode with Deuteronomy 4 and, do a few more chapters this week. If you're following the Hebrew Bible readings with me and the Geneva Bible readings, God keeps saying he'll do this, right? And this is what, we're not told by organized religion. But in the original text, in the Hebrew, and it gets very distorted in the English, especially modern translations, God keeps saying, if you follow my laws and you follow my commandments, which are not onerous, right? You will have long life. You'll have health. You'll have healthy children. You'll have the rain in due season. You'll eat and be satisfied. Your oil will be harvested. Your wheat will grow. You'll live safely with no one to make you afraid. He says it over and over and over, and your days will be long in the land, long, healthy days. He says that. And he doesn't say if you pursue this or that religion, or if you go to confession, or if you sacrifice, to a certain priesthood, or join a certain sect. He's not saying that. He's saying, if you follow my laws and are mindful of my statutes. And so in my own tiny way, maybe I'm supposed to say this, but if you follow my work, I've been trying, not easy. I was in Martha's Vineyard over the weekend, the home of the lobster roll. I am trying to keep kosher, baby kosher, right? I don't yet have the 2 sets of silverware, but I'm trying not to mix milk and meat, trying not to eat the, seafood that is clearly proscribed, doesn't have fins, doesn't have scales. Really no clam chowder, really hard. No cheeseburgers, right? No delicious bacon. I mean, not eating pork. It's a little thing, and you might think, well, that's so unreasonable. Why are you doing that? They didn't even know what lobsters were 3,600 years ago in Canaan. You could rationalize it away, and I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just saying, reading the Hebrew Bible and the Geneva Bible, I saw that God just kept asking for this and a few other things. Don't steal, don't commit adultery, honor your father and mother, very doable things. And as you know, the Chabad rabbis kind of explained to me, we don't know why he asked us to do all these things. But if you love someone, you don't know why they want you to load the dishwasher a certain way or why they prefer one brand of canned tomatoes over another, but you just do what they ask because you love them too, right? And that was such an honest way of describing it to me. And in the Hebrew Bible, God so isn't the guy we're told is sitting judgmentally up in the sky. He wants to be in a relationship with us that is a love relationship, that is a marriage, right? A family relationship. So I just thought, okay, he's clearly saying, just do this.